Morning, everyone, and welcome to the ECB Focus session. Today's topic is instant payments and particularly on tips. So we have decided to call this instant payments tips for getting there. So it's an event really that will deep down into this topic today. So we look forward to having all of you on board. My name is Aileen. I'm here with a great team of colleagues, and we will try to guide you through today and take as many questions that we can from you and really deep dive into tips. So a big program ahead of us today. I just want to briefly mention that we do live stream the event. So if you have any difficulties watching in the WebEx, you can move to the live stream. The QR code is on the screen now. So you can just scan it and move straight into the live stream. And the live stream is also the recording. So after the event, you can watch everything again. If there's something you missed or want to rewatch, that will be possible on the website after. I want to give a few practical information more before we start the event. As you have probably noticed, the ones who are in the WebEx, you cannot speak. We do this on purpose to have a good quality session and make sure that the sound is as optimal as possible. But you can ask questions, and we do encourage you to do this as much as possible throughout the event. You can either do it in the chat if you're connected via the WebEx. So you just write questions in the chat and we'll try to pick them up throughout the morning. Or if you're watching the live stream, you can send us an email. And we have the email address on the screen now. I'm going to keep it here for a little bit so you can dot it down or take a photo of it so you have it. But we'll also be showing it again throughout the event so that you can take it from there as well. But take a snapshot of it now. Before we start, because everyone is just gonna, you guys are gonna be in listening mode for the next few hours. We wanna, warm you all up. So with a little questionnaire, super quick, just a little icebreaker for everyone to get ready. So if you just grab your phones, grab your phone and just open the QR code, scan the QR code on the screen, very simple. Just lift it up, scan the QR code, and you will be straight in. And there we just have 4 super quick questions to find out a little bit about you and instant payments. So just take that 1 minute. It's not going to take long, just less than a minute, 30 seconds, and just click through those 4 questions. And that's really going to also help us see who you are and what you want to know about today. So that's just a little icebreaker for warming everyone up. We will, at the end of the event, ask you a few more questions. And I strongly encourage you to answer those. It's really like multiple choice type of questions. So it's really not going to take a lot of your time, but it would really help us see how we can improve the events we host for you and do them better in the future. So that's always our goal, is to be better and better every time. So really just take that 30 seconds at the end as well and fill in the questionnaire. And that's really it from me. So nice program ahead. So you see it here. And with that, I really just want to wish you all a good event and bring in our first speaker, which is Dimitri. So Dimitri, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Eileen. And a few words indeed on my side before giving the floor to the colleagues who will walk you through the substance today. First of all, we are, of course, delighted to welcome you in this focus session on tips. We had several physical events in the last month in various places in Europe. And this time we opted for an online setup. Well, the bad thing, of course, is that it's always better to meet and to shake hands. The good thing on the other side is that it allows us reaching many more people more easily and share with you information on tips more efficiently. Eileen told me that we had above actually more than 800 people registered, and then of course we are very happy that so many of you decided to seize the opportunity to learn more about tips. My name is Dimitri Patin. To keep it short, I'm in charge for the management of the target services here at the European Central Bank. and this means T2. I was about to say target 2, it's T2 for the settlement of large value payments. In this respect, one of my colleagues reminded me this morning that today is actually the first anniversary of the launch of T2, which replaced Target 2. Actually, literally 1 year ago, we launched the system, the new RTGS system. Beyond T2, we also have Target 2 securities for the securities settlement. For those who would not know, T2S is operating the settlement activity of 24 CSDs across Europe. Until recently, it was 19 CSDs, but we onboarded 5 new CSDs in September last year, so that brings a total of 24 CSDs on T2S. Of course, you know that we operate TIPS for instant payments, and you will hear a lot about TIPS today. And last but not least, we will also soon have a new system that we call ECMS for Eurosystem Collateral Management System, and that will be a unified system for the management of assets used as collateral for Eurosystem credit operations. Now, coming back to instant payments, the question is why organize such event at this stage? And of course, the relevance of such events stems from several elements, and let me detail that a bit. First, we have a shift in consumer habits. So this shift is happening at a pace that we have never seen before. The level and the speed of adoption of e-commerce and also digital retail payment solutions in general is there, and everything shows that the trend is there to stay, and it will continue. And in this context, users expect more than ever that their money is moving faster. People do not accept anymore that it takes hours, if not more, to transfer 20 euro to their son or daughter just because their account is not with the same bank. This is not acceptable anymore. And of course, the expectation is that such transfer is also possible across borders, that it's taking place without friction, in a safe manner, and also with a cost efficiency. And as if this was not sufficient, we have now the new legislative proposal from the European Commission, and that new proposal, which is now confirmed, will inevitably increase the pace for making instant payment the new norm in Europe. At the current juncture, we see that there are roughly 15, it may be 16, forgive me for that, but it's around 15% of the total number of SEPA credit transfer are taking place instantly. And of course, 15% is impressive, but still insufficient to make it a new norm. In another event not long ago, I had the opportunity to discuss what would be the main barriers for a steeper increase of instant payments. And the two elements that came naturally are fraud and costs. And the good news is that in the new legislative proposal from the Commission, we have those two aspects covered. The first one is the confirmation of payee, which is a new obligation which will tackle fraud. And of course, there is a provision, as you all know probably, that instant payments cannot be priced more than standard SEPA credit transfer. And that is also one of the barriers that will be removed when this comes into force. I will not develop this further because Fabrizio will come back to this in his intervention. I just mentioned that there is on average 15% of SEPA credit transfers taking place instantly, but this number is growing in Europe every day. And actually, TIPS is one of the places where this growth is particularly steep. These days, we settle around 1.2 to 1.3 million payments a day, and this figure is increasing week after week. But I'm actually particularly proud to share with you today, because it's the first time we can do that, with you that since February this year, so a few weeks, TIPS is also settling instant payment for Sweden in Swedish krona. And I will have the honor actually to celebrate this early next week in an event in Stockholm. And in numbers, it means that we settle on average between 2.3 and 2.6 million payments a day, sometimes a bit more, in Swedish krona. That means that in total today, TIPS is settling between, I say, 3.5 to 4 million payments a day, which is not nothing. And we are, of course, happy with the trust that the Swedish Central Bank has put in our system. But I'm also pleased to say that this is not the end, because if everything goes well, and I've no reason to believe that this will not be the case, we have planned to onboard the Danish krona as well in the course of Q2 next year. And that will also bring another significant increase in terms of volume settling in TIPS. Of course, you will hear today a lot of good things about the system. You will hear that TIPS is super fast, resilient, cost efficient, and also that it delivers full reachability across Europe, which is also an obligation. Eileen mentioned to me before this event that actually a very large number of participants, I think it's around 50%, are active in organizations that do not offer today instant payments. And of course, I hope that the information that you will receive today will help you in your journey towards offering instant payment to your customers. Maybe to finish here, to be more concrete, let me share with you the topics that we will discuss today. I think it's on the agenda now. We will start with Fabrizio. Fabrizio is our product manager for instant payments. He's leading the team that is designing the roadmap for future evolutions to TIPS. And today we'll also give you some insights in what the new IP regulation means concretely for us, for you as PSPs, but also for us as operator of the system. Then we'll continue with Jota. Jota is leading our operation team, and she will explain key operational elements of TIPS. I think this is also of relevance for an event like this one. Then we will have Geraldine. Geraldine will cover another important element of TIPS, which is pricing. And we will finish, last but not least, with Bobby. Bobby will take the floor. He's our onboarder in chief, as I like to call him. There is no question on how to join TIPS that he cannot answer. So I think we have the right casting for the event today. And it's now time for me to leave the floor to the colleagues. Maybe before that, I think Eileen mentioned it already. We like it when focus sessions are interactive. Of course, we cannot just open the floor for everyone to speak, because we are more than 500 actually currently in the session. So you will have to use the chat function to raise questions, but please do that. For us, it helps when we have questions and when we have the opportunity to answer them on the spot in this session. Well, it's time for me to wish you a good and insightful discussion today. I will come back at the very end of the session with some closing words, but Eileen, the floor back to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Exactly like Dimitri said, we have a super exciting program ahead of us today. So without too much additional talking from my side, I want to hand over to our first speaker, who's Fabrizio. So Fabrizio, over to you.
Thank you very much, Aline. First of all, can you hear me well?
Yes.
I hope so. Very good. So a very warm welcome also on my side to this event that we have put in place in a way to facilitate the process that in many institutions right now is ongoing on how to address the urgency of joining the instant payment movement, also in the aftermath of the instant payment regulation. So we are going to talk, at least I am going to talk about the European Instant Payment Settlement Engine. And then we will see what it really means. But before we even do this, you might have maybe a little bit of a doubt. Am I in the right place or am I not? Well, if you would like to hear about an instant payment platform that is the number one for the volumes in Europe, because we are now running for settling something like 1 billion transactions in the course of the year, you are in the right place. If you would like to hear about a platform that is not only attractive for the euro, but also for the Swedish krona, and actually we are right now, and I cannot mention them, but we are now dealing with nothing less than 10 different countries that would like to join the platform, not being a currency, I mean, not having the euro as their own currency. You are definitely in the right place. If you would like to hear about a platform that has never had any downtime. The only downtime that we have is when the EPC imposes a downtime, because you know that there was an important migration. We will talk about that in a moment. So if you would like to hear about a platform that has never a downtime, this is the right place. If you would like to hear about a settlement engine that has never stopped since the moment it started, this is the right place. And last but not least, if you want to hear about the fastest of all the instant payment platform and the super performing platform for instant payments, definitely this is the right place for you. So let's try to make sense out of this all, and let's move now on the first slide here that in a way was already announced by Deputy Director General Dimitri Patain. So you see that TIPS does not live in isolation. TIPS lives in a big context, which is also a very big advantage for all the participants. As you know, in 2007, and I am old enough that I was working for it, Target 2, that was the second generation RTGS for the euro, and so it settled large value payment, and that was in November. And for the first time, we had a single technical platform replacing the interconnection of different domestic RTGS systems. But the Eurosystem went on, and with the creation of T2S in 2015, it also put for the market on the table a platform for settling securities on, again, a single settlement platform. At the start, you know, we had a certain number of CSDs that has been growing constantly, and Dimitri was reminding us all that just in the last year, other 5 CSD joined the platform. So this is another one of the planetary successes of the Eurosystem. Now, in 2018, we have the creation of TIPS. We at the Eurosystem usually think first about others and then about ourselves. So in 2017, we already gave banks support for settling instant payment. But then it was in 2018 that we came up with our own platform. So we can settle instant credit transfer, so we can have payments that are settled in a matter of seconds anywhere in Europe. And that was not the end of the story for us. In 2023, so very, very recently, there was the new generation of the RTGS. So as Dimitri said, our Target 2 has been replaced by T2, that is now a new platform that has also consolidated technically the RTGS of Target 2 T2S. And then you see a little bit in gray, ECMS. It's not gray because we are not working a lot. Actually, I think that we are working very, very much on ECMS. But of course, it still has to materialize. And ECMS, as also Dimitri anticipated, is a unified system for managing assets used as collateral, of course, for operations with the Eurosystem. Now, why, in a way, we came up with TIPS? First of all, I think that nobody can say it better than our president, Christine Lagarde. And here I have to read because I could never say better myself. So our real-time settlement platform is a pivotal contribution to Europe's endeavors to satisfy citizens' increasing demand for faster, cheaper, and convenient payment services without compromising on security. And this definitely says it all. Of course, there were a number of challenges that TIPS is trying to address. So the digitalization of the economy, TIPS settles instant credit transfer in central bank money, the real thing. It's not like a commercial bank money that is backed by central bank money. TIPS is the only one that does it, the real thing. Then instant availability. TIPS offers a seamless service enabling to pay in a few seconds every day of the year. But actually, this is a little bit of a conservative way to say, because in a few seconds, I would really challenge this. We now have been taking measures of how fast we are. And in a moment, I will tell you that a few seconds is really something of the past. We are now going in the realm of the milliseconds. You will hear about that in a few moments. And then there was the fragmentation risk. TIPS is pan-European by construction. We want to serve the whole of Europe. We do not have any less in mind. And of course, we would like also to make sure that there is a pan-European market for instant payment. So not only because of TIPS, but because of the whole ecosystem that is serving Europe. Now, what is TIPS? Let's start saying really the very basics. TIPS is a system that in a way settles instant payments between PSPs. So you see here something that is within the perimeter of what TIPS covers and something that is outside of what TIPS covers. The final originator and the final beneficiary are out of our scope because they are part of the, let's say, the sphere of interests of the PSPO. So on one side, the TIPS participant on the originator side, and on the other side, on the beneficiary side. But whatever else is within TIPS. At the end of the process, the sending and the receiving participants get a payment confirmation. Let's stop a moment here because it's important. So we don't want, first of all, to jump into the business of others. But what we want to do is to make it easy for all the ecosystem. So, of course, you know how the SET Inst scheme works. We will talk about it in a moment. But in a way, what TIPS does is that it receives an instruction, it validates, it forwards to the beneficiary, it has to wait for the reply, it evaluates the reply, it validates it, and then settles, and then communicates to all of that. How fast is that? That is interesting because if you blink your eyes, TIPS has done already all of this without any stop and any slowdown. Just to tell you one thing, I guess that not many of you, even though you are now many hundreds here participating, not many of you have had the chance to play tennis with Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic is a fantastic tennis player, sort of a legend, and his serve is absolutely incredible. However, the time that the ball takes to leave the racket of Djokovic and reaches you on the other side is longer than the time that TIPS takes to have all of those things that I mentioned below, all the validation, all the forwarding, all the receiving, all the settling, and all of the other things that we have to do, the journaling. I mean, you can imagine how many things happen on a platform. All of that TIPS does in a faster time than it is needed to Djokovic to serve and let the ball reach you. In a way, you have more chances to beat Djokovic if you play tennis with him than any CSM can have to beat TIPS in terms of efficiency. But this is, of course, a joke. What is not a joke is this slide where Dimitri already anticipated. So you see here the graph where we have the chart of the estimated share of the SET Inst volume compared to the traditional, or let's say the old credit transfer, the slow credit transfer. You see that since 2017, when the scheme of instant payment was created, to now, there was quite of an increase, sometimes better, sometimes less so great. However, we have reached something like almost 17%. Should we be happy about that? No. We are going to use the words of a commissioner of the European Commission. We have to move ourselves between the world of the old letters to the world of the modern emails. So when you transpose this to payments, this is the kind of historical task that we have. Should we be happy that this kind of transition is going this slow? I think that none of us should be, and that is why the European Commission, not us, the European Commission decided that it was time to intervene and to make sure that this kind of situation is addressed. Of course, there are a number of reasons, and not bad reasons, for this to happen, but some are quite easy to address, and that is why the European Commission decided to intervene and to make sure that the problems can be one by one solved. let's go to give a look right now. Let's have a zoom on the SEPA instant credit transfer in Europe. TIPS, of course, as you well know, is compliant with this scheme. The scheme has not been designed by TIPS itself. It has been developed by the European Payments Council, or EPC, and that happened upon the invitation by the ERPB, so the Euro Retail Payment Board. And that was put there for not only for TIPS, of course, TIPS didn't even exist when the scheme came to light, but to all PSPs and CSMs that wanted to facilitate the settlement of instant payment. So what do PSPs need to do? They need two things, essentially. One is to adhere to the scheme, so to the SET in scheme, and the second is to onboard a clearing and settlement mechanism. So, of course, for us, there is only one. There is TIPS. You will never ever hear me saying anything bad about other clearing and settlement mechanisms that also offer instant payment. They do really a good job. I think just they are not in the condition to offer a good service as we can do because of a number of reasons. And I hope that by the end of this presentation, you will have an idea of why TIPS is de facto the best solution for everybody. But in any case, of course, it is important to mention that there are also other CSMs that also offer instant payment. As for the SET Inst main elements, let's go one by one, these 6 boxes. One is that the new scheme is based somehow on the already existing, the slow SEPA credit transfer scheme. Of course, it has been updated and reviewed in a way so that it is good for a real fast execution, but it is based on that one. And that also facilitates life of the PSPs. The scope is not only the European Union, but the whole of the European Economic Area. So it's something that goes, of course, beyond the Euro area. And as we said, also beyond the European Union. The credit transfers are in euro, so the EPC scheme of the SET Inst only cover credit transfers in euros. The funds are available to the beneficiary in maximum 10 seconds. Well, first of all, we have to say that with TIPS, it takes much less. We will never leave your customers waiting for a response because TIPS is the fastest of all. But it has also to be said that now everybody needs to hurry up, and I hope that everybody will be able to cope with the different timeline that the European Commission has included in the instant payment regulation. TIPS doesn't have to adapt anything. We were the fastest before, we are the fastest now, we will be the fastest later, already within all the short time that any regulation can put in place. The transactions are up to 100,000 euros, so this is the maximum amount. But this is a little bit of a tricky point. So first of all, the scheme came up with a maximum amount of only 15,000 euros. Then it was reviewed to 100,000. But the scheme today gives the possibility to, according to bilateral or multilateral arrangements, to have this limit lifted. And so in TIPS, we give the possibility to PSPs also to accept payments that are beyond 100,000 euros. Of course, there is no obligation because that remains, as of today, it remains the limit for the scheme. But in case of interest in having also payments that go beyond 100,000 euros, well, TIPS is already there, as for many other things. And number 6, it is an optional scheme. So, of course, PSPs can adhere as beneficiary only or as both originators and beneficiary. Well, this is one of the problems, but also a problem that has been addressed by the IPR. We will see why this optionality has been in a way touched by the European Commission. If we go to the next slide, we see the main features of TIPS. First of all, when TIPS was created, it had the same participation criteria as for Target 2, so now we say T2, but in a way, the eligibility for having an account in central bank money, of course, if you want to have the real thing of the central bank money, you have to be eligible for it, otherwise it is impossible. But if you are eligible for that and you want to offer instant payments, that means that you are compliant with the SCT Inst scheme, as you see on the down on the left-hand side, of course, the doors of TIPS are open for your institution. As we said, TIPS from the very beginning decided that the settlement that we wanted to cover is the settlement in central bank money. Again, the real thing. So not any fake central bank money, nothing that is supported by or backed by. It's really the real money that central banks can provide, and only central banks can provide. Then the pan-European platform. So first of all, it is pan-European by definition because we serve the whole of the euro area and beyond with our RTGS services. Our platform, of course, is following the ISO 20022 standard, which might be obvious for the SCT Inst, but it's not obvious for also other messages. So the messages that have to be processed according to the SCT Inst, of course, are ISO 20022, but also all the others are now following that ISO 20022 standard, making the life of all participants really easier. Multi-currency technical capability. This, I would like to stop a moment. Dimitri already mentioned it. So before having anybody interested in settling instant payments for their non-euro currency in TIPS, we had the ambition that we want to work better than anybody else. And we want to make sure that we are there also to support possibly other communities. But it was not given that this would have been really requested by anybody. Wow, if it was requested by anybody. So first of all, we are all honored, not proud, honored that the trust of the Swedish community now is on TIPS. And you know, Sweden is the most mature market in Europe for instant payment. If they come to TIPS, you might wonder, they must have had some good reason. And the good reason is not only for the Swedish community, as we anticipated before, in more or less 1 year from now, the Danish community is coming to TIPS. 10 other countries are knocking at the door of the Eurosystem to bring their currencies to TIPS because they all realize that TIPS is the platform of the present, but even more the platform of the future. It's already the #1 settlement platform now. So imagine what it will become. And of course, we have to operate on full cost recovery and not for profit basis, not for profit basis. We will not make a profit out of what we do. It's a lot of the work that we do is really to serve Europe. It's an ideal that goes really beyond the concept of a profit. Now, pan-European reachability, what is it and how does it work? Because when we arrived in 2018, there was a big problem. Imagine a world where you have a certain telephone provider and you can only call other people that have a phone with the same telephone provider. It doesn't work. It would never work. And nobody would have been able to solve this problem until in the MiPay, the Eurosystem and ECB in particular, I would say, was asked to please solve the problem of everybody else. And we really did. The Governing Council approved a package in mid-2020 that makes, in a way, TIPS even more pan-European than before, and makes also the other ACHs more pan-European. So what was decided? It was decided that all ACHs actually have to bring their technical accounts from Target 2 at the time to TIPS. And in a way, so we are able to serve them from TIPS. We make every instant payment, those that we settle and also those that we do not settle, we make them possible. And then we also had the other decision of the Governing Council that if a PSP adhered to the SCT Inst and is reachable also on the RTGS system, it has to be reachable in TIPS. When we say reachable in TIPS, we mean that it has to be reachable in a TIPS DCA, so not on an account of an ACH, but on a TIPS dedicated cash account. As for TIPS itself, more than 99% of the PSP who adhere to the scheme are now already reachable on the TIPS DCA, and the rest are reachable via technical account of the ACHs. So one stop, you come to TIPS and you can reach anybody else. You, of course, have to pay the services of TIPS, but not the services on anybody else unless you really want to. And that, of course, is a freedom that we would never deny. All the 11 ACHs offering instant payment services, as we said, have moved their account from target to TIPS. And this way, TIPS helps to ensure that instant payments can be rolled out anywhere in the euro area, irrespective of the location of the senders and of the receiver's bank. This especially because there are a number of solutions that have, in a way, a domestic scope in mind. And we wanted to provide a solution that, with one platform, gives the solution for every payment, domestic and not domestic. Compliance with the IPR. This is now the tricky point that is also a new tricky point, and that is in a way one of the triggers of this event of today. So there are new obligations that come for the PSPs out of the IPR. IPR stands, I repeat, for Instant Payment Regulation. And that is very apropos today, because this week it was published on the journals of the European Union. So it has become really reality, the law of the land, although it will take a little bit because it has sort of a phased approach. So different obligations are coming with different timing, but we will see that in a moment. The main 4 requirements towards the PSPs are this. First of all, instant payments and channel. For every payment, regardless of the channel, every PSP has to offer the instant payment possibility to settle if it is offering the slow SCT that was already giving before. So now the user will have the power to decide, and it can decide, yes, I want to go slow, or no, I want to go fast. Second, the price cannot be any more, in a way, a problem, meaning that there is the obligation now to offer instant payments at no extra cost. I know that many of the hundreds of people that are connected today, as citizens of the European Union, still have the problem that their own bank is asking for a premium. There is no need to have a premium, especially with the pricing of instant payments that we have put in place, and Geraldine will show to you. So there is now the obligation that will kick in, you will see in a matter of months, so that everybody will decide, not because one is more costly than the other, but just because I want to go fast. I really want my bank to do it fast, and I cannot be here to accept any price additional to what was the payment of the old payment before. Fraud. For the fraud, as also Dimitri said before, there will be the obligation to offer a verification of pay service. This is something that unfortunately, I would say, is also a problem of knowledge that needs to be brought to the more general public. But you know, if I want to send 10 euros to Dimitri Patain, and I put his name in my form, but then the IBAN is the IBAN of someone else, I might think that the payment is reaching Dimitri, but it's not. And that is where a lot of frauds are coming into place. So a lot of people receive links that create in a way, pre-filled forms that look very legitimate. The problem is that the IBAN that is there is not the IBAN of the name that is included in the pre-filled form, and that is the IBAN of the fraudster. So this element of the IPR will definitely reduce the number of frauds. And on the side of the screening, there will be now the obligation to verify at least on a daily basis the clients against the EU sanctions list. This is something that in a way is removing friction from the instant payment settlement, because before this was something that had to be done on a payment by payment basis, and it was definitely a problem for a number of institutions. Now this has been definitely simplified. Now, in terms of timeline, I mentioned that the timeline is of essence here, because there are a number of different obligations, and each one comes to a certain time. So in February, the final version of the regulation was adopted by the European Parliament and the European Council. In April, there will be the entry into force, actually 20 days after the publication in the EU official journal that happened this week. Now, in January of 2025, the Euro PSPs must be able, there is no way out. They must be able to receive at least instant payments, maybe not send yet, but at least to receive, and already to ensure that when they offer the credit transfer on an instantaneous basis, they cannot ask for any additional price compared to the old slow credit transfer. In addition, the Euro and non-Euro PSPs must have already a screening in place for the listed persons and entities. Then, in October of 2025, the Euro PSPs must be able, again, must be able. So in this case, the reachability, I mean, the fact that you are receiving is no longer sufficient. So you have to be able to send instant payment, and you as a PSP have to be able to provide this verification of payee service, even on a payment by payment basis, which is really something, and for which we are also thinking of whether we can help the market. 2027, if we jump to 2027 in April, Euro non-banks PSP, so the EMIs and the PIs, or electronic money institution and the payment institutions, must be able to receive and send instant payment. Now, we were talking about the verification of payee. We know that it is quite of a difficult service to put in place. We know also that somewhere it is already in place in some communities, but of course this is now a totally new ballpark because it has to be done on a European basis. So we are, as you can see, currently analyzing whether we as TIPS can provide a verification of pay service that would be provided, of course, by the PSPs to their customers. So, of course, the obligation is not an obligation on us, on TIPS. It remains an obligation on PSPs, but of course we are looking into it to see whether we can support PSPs, and of course we are checking all the different possibilities and options in terms of the matching algorithms that have to be put in place. Now, TIPS is an evolving platform. You think that, okay, but it's already the best one. Should we really think of evolving TIPS? Well, yeah, we don't stop at any point in time. So certainly we don't stop now. I remember when I was going into meetings where, you know, TIPS was the Cinderella of the CSMs, and there were jokes of, and I always said, well, let's wait and see, because we are working on a number of things, and I am confident that the market will recognize the effort. Now that we are the number one, of course, we are happy to have achieved this result, but not for this reason we are going to stop. Now, a few examples. Enhancement on the platform, you know, we are sometimes, I think it's natural that we like to think about the next big thing. But sometimes the users tell us that it's not the big thing that is important to their life. Sometimes it's a little thing that is really improving their life. And for that, we have been listening to all the community through the consultative group for TIPS, but also through all the banks that are liaising with the national central banks and channel their comments through us. And we have done a major announcement of the graphical user interface. It has been requested really very out loud, and although we were maybe thinking that how can it be really improving so much, we really went to study the things, and we realized that indeed this graphical user interface could improve the life of our users, and now this is reality. And there is also the work on the rule-based liquidity transfer between TIPS and T2, that there is now a change request 28 that will make sure that when there is a breach of a certain predefined ceiling level or floor level, there will be an automatic liquidity transfer between a main cash account in T2 and the TIPS DCA. So you see things that are very, very practical and can improve especially the life of banks in those hours when the the balance of the accounts is not actively monitored. Maybe, I mean, big banks can do it 24/7, but maybe some other banks will not. And so having this in place will definitely improve their life. But then let me talk a little bit about the big things, because there are a number of big things that have been already done. Tips, resilience, and continuity enhancement. You might have never realized that this is in place, and that is the best proof of its success. Tips is the only platform that not only is the super fast, but it's also the super resilient, because we have 3 different sites, active, and we moved the old, let's say, architecture to the new one in a way that nobody even realized. So chapeau to the engineers that made it happen, and for making this now at the service of all of Europe. Then, we have participated to the migration to the 2019 version of ISO 20022 messages. In the end, this is nothing that we did. I mean, it was decided by the EPC. We participated without any glitch. We were ready from the minus some hundreds, because we had some dress rehearsal and we proved to all of our community that we were really ready. The EPC decided to have half an hour of downtime. We had half an hour of downtime, not 1 second more. We could have done without downtime, but of course we are part of a community and we definitely go with it. We know that not all the market would have been able to do it without downtime. So we decided, of course, to be compliant with the request of the EPC. And then, as we were talking about it before, there are additional currencies within the euro. Sweden is there as of February 2024. As we know, Denmark is supposed to come in Q2 of next year. Norway is discussing with us. It's not any secret, it is public information on the website of Norges Bank, and we are honored for this as well. And I cannot talk to you about the names because they are not public information, but as I said, we have nothing less than 10 different countries that are trying to knock on the door of the Eurosystem to bring their currency on tips for settling instant payments. And we are really looking forward to start the work for those central banks that will see merits in coming to tips. And then cross-currency instant payment, we are working now that the Swedish krona is on the platform. I think that also the priorities of the banks is more ready in a way than before. Banks are more ready, and we can restart with more impetus to work on a solution that will allow cross-currency settlement for the currencies that are hosted in tips. So in this case, euro and Swedish krona, but as I said, others are coming. But this is not the only thing that we are doing. And of course, this is probably the thing that is the one that we are working the most, but there are a number of other initiatives where we are exploring the possibility to open tips to linkages to other platforms. So possibility to have a cross-currency instant payment on a cross-platform basis. So this is in terms of strategic announcement. There is much more that I cannot talk about. I have to be patient and be in a way restrain myself, although it's always so lovely when you have a great team, and the ECB is a great team, the Eurosystem is a great team. You would like to share all the wonderful things that you are preparing right now. There are things that we can share, there are things that we cannot. So for the time being, we have to leave it there. Now, for questions, as you were informed before, you could write in the chat, and you could send also an email. You can still do to the mit.events@ecb.europa.eu. But now, as I am presenting, I do not have the access to the questions. So, Eileen, I guess that I am now in your hands in terms of what questions you select for me.
Exactly, Fabrizio. Thank you so much for a super presentation. So now we all know a lot more about tips, but this has also triggered a lot of questions, right? So some of the questions you guys are asking, keep going on your questions. First of all, it's super to see many questions coming in, but a lot of them will be answered later. So be patient. I know it's super exciting. You want to hear the whole story at the beginning, but some of them we will be picking up in a minute when Jota joins us. So, but there's a few that I want to bring to you, Fabrizio. So there's a few questions on the multi-currency. So I think we need to be very specific about what we mean currently, like today, in tips on multi-currency. Because now we have the Swedish kroner on board and we have the euro on board. So can you maybe just explain a little bit to everybody here that we're talking Swedish kroner payments to Swedish kroner. We're not talking currency conversion, because I think there's some questions about that in the chat. So maybe just spend a few minutes. What does it mean when a currency comes on board?
So first of all, thanks a lot to those who raised this point, because it's a very important point. And I would say that the key element here is time. So the time today, we have a payment that takes off in euro and lands in euro, or takes off in Swedish krona and lands in Swedish krona. So there is only mono currency payments are currently handled by TIPS, but you know that we have also published, and Deline were super in making all the communication also on the website, on the interest that we are having for having cross currency, so a payment that might take off in euro and land in Swedish krona or in Danish krona or in any of the other currencies that are coming to settle into TIPS. This is nothing that is happening today, but it is something that we are really working a lot, and we hope that pretty soon we bring to the possibility of those who are in TIPS.
Exactly. So super. Thank you so much, Rubit. I think that clears a lot. And then just maybe also another, I can see a lot of questions coming in, is about how does a currency come on TIPS? Maybe you could just spend a little bit of words about what does it actually mean that the Swedish kroner came onto TIPS? Well,
oh, that's an excellent question. Of course, I would like to spend a lot of time on this dossier. It has been one of the most important dossiers of my life, working with colleagues of Riksbank. I not only found a community that is so super in instant payment, but I also found a lot of friends there. But what does it really mean? So when a central bank sees TIPS and thinks that TIPS can be really the best because, for example, it is super performing, or maybe, and we have not even talked about that, because it's the super platform in terms of cyber resilience, and maybe especially for small countries, you might not want to invest a lot of money that is needed for cope with the threats of the cyber threats. So a central bank can inform us and say, hey, first of all, they do not have to come to us already with any commitment. And actually, nobody has done that. But they come to us saying that, oh, we see that TIPS is an interesting proposition for us. We would like to discuss with you. We would like to have information from you. We would like to see how this could serve our community. That is what has happened with the Swedish community upon the initiative of Riksbank, the same in Denmark, and the same might happen soon in other currencies. But so you don't have to have any commitment to come to us to inform us that indeed you have realized that any little domestic, maybe instant payment solution in a single country will be not an efficient solution in financial terms, in technological terms, in readiness towards the future. I mean, in a number of perspectives. You come to us, you inform us, we start talking to you with no commitment at all, and you will see that in the end, we will be colleagues, first of all, because if a central bank comes to us, we definitely understand their perspective. It's the same perspective that we have. And we will see if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we will remain anyway good friends. We have met a lot of friends in this super journey, and I'm sure that others will join.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Yeah, so we've clarified that. So it's really the central bank and then connecting to the TIPS platform with their currency. So super. So I think we have the multi-currency feature sorted. We have a few questions also. Maybe we go back to the instant credit transfer, to the SEPA credit transfer instant scheme. So it's a few questions on that. So the scheme itself. So one question is, what does it mean to adhere to the scheme? Somebody's asking. Can you give a few words on that?
Well, the adherence is a process that you have to work out with the European Payments Council. So you contact the European Payments Council and you will see what needs to be done. What we know is that it is in a way finalized by having your institution being included in a special register at the EPC. And that is actually also a precondition to come to TIPS. And as I know that all of the banks that are here are definitely considering coming to TIPS, they need to be aware of the fact that we cannot even allow anybody to come to TIPS if there is no compliance with the SCT Inst. It's not just that we are being in a way that the police of the world, but it's the fact that we need to make sure that all the institutions that come to the platform are able to deal with the technicalities of the platform and also for the benefit of all the other participants that are already there. So in a way, for the safety in a way, and the good work and the good functioning of TIPS and also of all the other ACHs that are connected to us, it's important that that is a precondition, so a step that has to be done before coming to us.
Thank you for that. Then we also have a few questions on limits. So it's not really something that's up to TIPS as such, but maybe we could just spend a few words on the people asking questions about the limits of instant payments. So you
Okay.
referred to it a little bit as well, but you know what's with TIPS and what's actually with the regulation and the EPC. So maybe you want to talk about that.
TIPS gives the highest level of freedom to PSPs because the scheme itself, so the SCT Inst, foresees a limit, so it is called the maximum amount that currently is at 100,000 euros. First of all, I know that the lawyers are looking into the IPR to see whether the IPR might mean that we have to even remove that limit. But for the time being, it's there. However, in TIPS, we make use of one specific provision that is part of the SCT Inst rulebook, saying that on the basis of bilateral or multilateral agreements, this limit can be lifted. So in a way, we give the possibility to all the PSPs that are in TIPS also to settle, to receive payments that go beyond 100,000 euros, but it is their choice. We do not impose, of course, every participant in TIPS has to accept payments up to 100,000 euros. But as I said, if they want to accept more than that, it is up to them. It's a freedom that we do not deny.
Very good. We have a little bit also, okay, so everyone, you know, bear with us in here. So we're trying to sort out questions that fit for now and
with
some
hundreds of participants, I guess it's easy to lose track of it.
Yeah, that will come later. So that you were active and we asked for this. So thank you. There's some questions about the geographical scope, right, of TIPS and who can join the target services. But this is back to, you spoke a little bit about the eligibility criteria at the beginning.
Yes.
Do you want to say a word on that again, maybe just to make sure everyone...
Well, the scope is the scope of the SCT Inst. That is not different from the scope of any other of the SEPA schemes. So whoever is familiar with the SEPA schemes, so the slow SCT, the SDD, I mean, we are all familiar with the incredible work of the European Payments Council on that. So this one is a new scheme, sort of new. I mean, it came to light in November 2017, but has not changed the geographical scope. So as we know, it's a scheme only for Euro payments, but it goes beyond the Euro area. It goes beyond the European Union. It reaches the SEPA area, so the single Euro payments area that is defined in the SEPA regulation. So I guess that we have to leave it to the sacred texts, I would assume.
Exactly. Thank you, Fabrizio. So I think what we're going to do now is that we're going to move over to Jota, because Jota is going to talk us through the next part of the the session today a little bit about how TIPS operate. So we're going to, let Fabrizio go a little bit. He's not going to go far, so he's going to be around. And then I'm going to bring in Jutta, and we're going to talk about the operational side of TIPS, because then I think that some of the questions that you guys are shooting to us in the chat here, Jutta will answer. So Jutta, over to you. And
Bye for now.
Yeah, and bye to Fabrizio for a little bit.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Aline, and thank you, Fabrizio, for the interesting session before. I'm a bit overwhelmed with all the questions that I see coming in, so I hope that some of them we will address in my own presentation. So what we will look at together is a little bit more specifics of the operations of TIPS. My name is Jutta Bendaliotu. I work here at the ECB. I'm the team lead of the operational team on T2 and TIPS operations, and my team is responsible for day-to-day operations, incident management, business continuity. So let's jump straight in, and I think you've seen, let me just take control of the screen again, thanks. Here. So you've seen this before from Fabrizio, just to break it down a little bit how TIPS works. So one beneficiary on one side, let's say John, the originator on the other side, for instance, Mary, they want to send money to each other, and TIPS makes that possible any time of the day, any day of the year. So we work 24/7, 365, providing a final and irrevocable settlement of instant payment, and of course, providing the settlement in central bank money. So like Fabrizio said, this is a very important feature of TIPS that you're very familiar with, probably also with our other target services. Now, there are a lot of questions about who can participate in TIPS, so I think it's useful that we have this part in our presentation. So for the participation in TIPS, we have the same criteria applicable as we have for our RTGS system, the T2 system. Now, this means that for credit institutions established in the EU or the economic area, the European Economic Area, including branches. So it could be also an institution that is outside, but it's established a branch in the EU, and then they can work also from that. There were some questions also for UK banks, for example, that is also applicable to a UK bank. They could participate in a specific way that we're going to cover as well. So besides the credit institutions established in the EU, we also have credit institutions established outside the European Economic Area. And of course, we have the central banks of the Euro and the ECB, and central banks that are choosing to provide settlement in their own currency can also do that. Like we have the example already for the Swedish market that is providing settlement in Swedish krona. Now, besides this, we also have the ability to include in our TIPS participants treasury departments of governments, public sector bodies, investment firms, and entities managing ancillary systems in the definition that we have, which is again established in the European Union or the EEA, and they are offering financial services, the settlement and clear of funds through their own accounts in target. Now, one important element to note is that when you want to participate in TIPS, especially if you already are participating in the target services, for example, if you're a T2 participant, it is actually very, very simple to also participate in TIPS. It's the addition of one more kind of account opening for those that are already participating in T2, and there's a predefined set of terms and conditions, and the central banks, the national central banks that are responsible for the contractual relationship between anyone who joins TIPS they're very much aware, and they have a vast experience when it comes to the preparation of the contract. So when it comes to you joining TIPS, this is one important point to remember, that your counterparty will be your national central bank, who will take you by the hand and make sure that everything you need will be set up and provide all the relevant information for you. And those will be, again, the ones that you will have a contract with. Now, when you would like to access tips, of course, one of the first questions you're going to ask and you will have to decide is what kind of participation in tips you would like to have. There's actually 3 ways that you can access tips. One way is being a direct participant, let's say. So the participant is an entity that owns one or more tips accounts. So the type of accounts that we have in tips are 2. We have the tips dedicated cash accounts, and we have the tips ancillary system account, the technical account, that I think also some of you have mentioned in some questions. Now, these are different participation types, and we'll see a little bit later in a graphical representation how they work and how they interact with tips. The other option you might decide that for your own PSP, it's better to become a reachable party in tips. So the difference is the reachable party does not own an account, so you will not have one account in tips, but you will have an arrangement in place where you can access another entity's account in tips by entering into a contractual agreement with that other participant. And the third way to access tips is with an instructing party. So instructing parties also enter into contractual agreements with one or more participant reachable parties, and what they do is they come and instruct on their behalf. So they take care of the communication with tips. Now, maybe we look at this again a little bit more in detail. So these are the 3 types of participations, like we said. The participant in tips which will have an account and is able to send and receive instant payments. The participant can directly instruct payments to tips, and payments are settled on this account. The reachable party, like we said, would not have its own account, but they would make use of a participant's account, so a tips DCA, which is the dedicated cash account. They can also instruct payments, and they can settle payments on the account of the participant that they have a contractual relationship with. And on the side here, we also see the instructing party who can be used to instruct on behalf of a participant or on behalf of a reachable party in tips. And I think it even becomes more clear when we start looking a little bit at some diagrams and all the options that tips can actually offer for you. One of the main benefits of tips is actually that we provide a lot of options to the PSPs that would like to make use of tips. It really depends on your choice and the needs of your organization. And it is very important also to note that each PSP can have its own setup, and another PSP in the local community could have another setup. A third one could have a different setup. So it really allows a lot of variety here and a lot of options. So this also reflects a little bit how we can bring the pan-European reachability that Fabrizio has been mentioning and that we wanted to ensure with tips. So there's 3 different options for PSPs to settle an instant payment. Looking at the first one here, we have one PSP on one side of tips, another PSP on the other side of tips. They both have their own tips account, and they exchange directly with tips, providing settlement in their own account. So they instruct in tips, and the settlement takes place in the tips DCAs. Now, if we go below to the second case, we have the second option, instructing in an ACH and settling in a tips DCA. So we said that besides the tips accounts, we also have the tips technical accounts, which are used by the ACHs who are participating in tips. I think we now have about 12 ACHs also participating in tips. And you can see in the illustration here that we have on the left side of the ACH, one PSP intermediary there between that PSP and tips is the ACH. So they can instruct in the ACH, which can then instruct towards tips and reach out another tips participant on the other side who is directly connected to tips, having the settlement take place in a tips DCA. Then there's the third option here on the right of the screen, which is showing the option of instructing in an ACH and settling in an ACH. So this is where the TIPS pan-European reachability measures came and made it actually possible for ACHs to speak between themselves. So you can see on the left side, we have one ACH. On the right side of TIPS, we have another ACH. They both have a TIPS AS technical account with us, and then they service their own customers. And on the left side, what used to happen also before we had the pan-European reachability measures, you could have PSP1 reach PSP2 within the settlement of the ACH. So the instruction and the settlement took place in the ACH. But PSP1 would not be able to reach PSP3, which was participating in a second ACH. Now, what TIPS does is also bridging this gap, making sure that all PSPs can reach each other no matter what participation setup they will be choosing. I know that there's a lot of information, but I look forward also to the question part. But I want to break it down even more for you and take an example of an instant payment settlement. So the first example is a simple one between two TIPS participants. Let's break it down step by step. Step one, Bank A is taking, let's say, from me, an instruction that I want to send an instant payment. So it will send a PAX8 message, a payment transaction to TIPS, communicating which is myself, the originator bank, and which bank I want to reach on the other side, the beneficiary bank. Step two, TIPS will validate this instant payment transaction and make a reservation on the amount at stake. So the amount is reserved at the first step there at TIPS. Step three, TIPS will communicate this information to the other bank on the other end with another PAX8 message, and the second bank needs to provide an acknowledgement. So it has to respond to TIPS acknowledging that it has received this information. Now, if that is a positive acknowledgement, then we go to step 5 underneath, that is actually the settlement. So settlement will take place in TIPS. We have the accounts in TIPS. It will debit the account on one hand and credit the account on the other hand. Right after the settlement takes place, TIPS will send a confirmation of the settlement to the originator party, so the bank A at the left that initiated the transaction, but also is going to confirm settlement to bank B on the right. So all of these things happen, like Fabrizio said, extremely quickly. So this is a simple example of an end-to-end transaction via TIPS. So this is making use of two TIPS participants. And just to give you a little bit of a comparison, there's also another example here with a TIPS participant and a reachable party. And like we said, a reachable party does not have an account in TIPS, but could make use of another account in TIPS or go via an instructing party. So again, on the left side is pretty much similar. Bank A sends a transaction to TIPS. TIPS validates and reserves the amount, sends and forwards this transaction to the other side, which could be a participant that's acting as intermediary, or it could be an instructing party, who will then pass on this communication on to the final bank, the reachable party on the right, which is Bank B. Again, here we need to have the instructing party or the participant in the middle acknowledging and responding to TIPS to ensure that this cycle of communication in the transaction is completed. And then once the settlement process is taking place, then TIPS will confirm settlement again to both sides, to the participant and to the instructing party. So then the instructing party will, of course, need to pass on this information to the Bank B that it is servicing. So this is another example of a setup. Like I said before, there are many options. There's a lot of flexibility, really, and we can see in different countries, different setups, multiple scenarios could work, really relying and depending on what the institutions would need. Then moving on a little bit more to some main technical elements of TIPS. So you know very well that the EPC scheme requirement was requiring an end-to-end processing time of 10 seconds. So that was something that you all know, and that was also how we started TIPS. But in reality, we're much, much faster than that. We have a commitment to settle 99% of all of our payments under 5 seconds. But what we see in practice is that we settle our instant payments in just a few milliseconds that, like Fabrizio mentioned before, all of our traffic is actually settled very fast. We provide availability around the clock, meaning there's no daily maintenance window. TIPS works around the clock. We have no interruption of the service. We have so far a record of a 100% technical availability of the settlement engine. And the only time we interrupted the settlement engine was actually this past weekend for the migration to the new ISO version, changing the EPC schemes, which I think many of you had to also participate in. Another interesting element is, somebody might ask, since you never stop the engine, how do you actually do your upgrades? How do you introduce changes and new releases to your service? Well, the way we do it without interrupting at all our service. And this is because we have multiple instances of TIPS, and what we do, we roll the changes to one at a time. So we will roll the change in the first node, make sure that everything is working fine, and once that first node is upgraded, we're going to take offline a second node, upgrade that one, put it back online, and then take a third node. So we ensure that the operations is still run by a node or multiple ones, and then we update them one at a time in a rolling basis. When it comes to also like large volumes and scalability, I think you have also already heard a little bit. We already today handle really large volumes of transactions, and this is coming from Euro transactions, but also Swedish krona transactions. And what we also have in place is that our technical infrastructure allows that in case we do need it, TIPS capacity could still be further increased. Now, if we also move on to a little bit more information on the service continuity arrangements and the technical design of TIPS, how do we ensure that TIPS is always running? So one of the elements there is the operating model, which actually runs in one region and 3 sites. This is something that you will not find as very common, but as the Eurosystem being the systemic importance we have and the experience we have in other target services, we have the ability and we have decided to move to a 3 sites operating model, which means we have 3 identical sites running in parallel. So in case of any disaster of the one running production, immediately the system just moves on and switches to run from the second side. TIPS is also very much able to adapt its behavior when it identifies an issue in any of the nodes. So we talked about these different nodes that the processes are running in, and this is an example here. So we always have a primary node that is running processes, and in case of any issue identified, the secondary node, one of the secondary nodes, will automatically become the primary node, ensuring the continuous operations. This is also something that the Eurosystem tests regularly, ensuring that we're always having availability of our service continuity arrangements. And I think another very important element for all of you and interesting is the liquidity management for TIPS. How do you fund, defund your account in TIPS? So again, here we have a little bit of a graphical representation to help you see it a little bit easier. On one hand side here, you can see T2, and on the other hand side, you can see target TIPS and the accounts in TIPS. Now, between T2 and TIPS, we have the option of funding, defunding at all times that the RTGS is available. So the T2 is an example, of course, but the same kind of exists for the Swedish RTGS system as well, for the funding and defunding of Swedish krona. Now, the funding is actually available during the opening hours of the RTGS. In the case of T2, that means from 19:30 in the evening when we open the new day in T2 until next day 1800. So you're probably all very much familiar with the business day that we have for our target services. We start the day in the evening with a business day of the next actually calendar day. So we open at 7:30 T2, and then we run the same business day until next day 1800. During this whole time, funding and tip funding can happen towards the tips accounts. Further than that, during the times even when T2 is not available, there is the option of having liquidity transfers taking place within tips. So you can move liquidity between tips DCAs and tips technical accounts of the ACHs. So that can happen 24/7, 365. Another important element thing to note is that the tips settlement, because I always get this question, settlement in tips will have the same business day as the corresponding RTGS. And we always get a question, but how do you then what's the value date for a Saturday transaction? So the T2, which is our RTGS for the Euro, on Friday evening takes business day Monday. So a transaction on Friday evening and Saturday and Sunday will have business day Monday in tips. Now, what happens at the level of the PSP? There has been discussions across the market participants, and the best practice across the market participants that was agreed that PSPs actually validate their instant transactions on the calendar day that they're executed in. So there's a little bit of differentiation there, but this is something that the market has already been working around, and this is the usual situation. But I know that usually there's a question coming up for this one. Now, liquidity management and tips further supports your liquidity management according to your also minimum reserve requirements. So for those institutions that are required to hold minimum reserves with their central banks, it is very important to note that the balance that you have in your tips DCA counts towards your minimum reserve requirements. This means at the end of the day, the liquidity sitting in your CLM account, your MCA, the liquidity sitting in the RTGS account, also adding the tips liquidity will count towards your minimum reserve requirement. This is not the case for the tips ancillary system technical account, because in that case, the funds in a technical account of an ACH are legally owned by the settlement bank, so it's not actually owned by the ACH. So they cannot directly count for your minimum reserve fulfillment. The tips DCA balances also count towards a recourse to automatic margin lending facility. So a numerical example here for you. Let's say we have you have a negative balance in CLM and RTGS of -200, and then you have a positive balance in tips of 350. This would be summed up, meaning you have an overall positive balance of €150, which can be counted towards your minimum reserve requirements, and there is no need for an automatic marginal lending facility to be used. Then looking a little bit at the tips business day schedule. So we talked about the change of business. It happens together with the RTGS, and the new business day in tips starts at 1800 on every day. Now, 24/7, 365, tips is available for processing instant payments, recalls, local reference data updates inside tips, and running queries. Then you can see that there's the relationship between also tips and CLM and your accounts in CLM and your other accounts potentially if you're participating in our T2 service. You can have liquidity transfers settling between tips DCAs and ASTAs within tips 24/7, 365, and liquidity transfers between tips and our other services running from 19:30 until 1800, which is the closing of the next day. So the other important element to note is, since this is an instant payment engine and we're talking about 24/7, 365 settlement, when do we decide what is our end of day balance? When is that time that you will say, okay, this exact second is my end of day balance? So this happens at 1800. At 1800, there's a snapshot taken, which will represent the end of day balance on all TIPS accounts. And that's the figure that will also count towards your minimum reserve requirements and any recourse to automatic margin lending. Then another question that we usually get is, how do I know who's reachable in TIPS? How can I see who are participating in TIPS? So on a daily basis, TIPS generates the TIPS directory. The TIPS directory includes all the BICs of TIPS participant and reachable parties. So any BIC that can be reached via TIPS is included in this list. This is generated daily at 1700 in the afternoon, and there's two ways that you can actually access it. It can be pushed by TIPS if you configure a report configuration to automatically receive the TIPS directory every day, you may receive it. Or the other way, you can actually log in your screen and just go yourself and download the directory. There's also two versions of the directory always available. There's the full list and there's a Delta version. So compared, depending on this on the PSP, they might prefer to work with the Delta version every day, or they might prefer to make use of the full version every day. Now, just to also mention the number of participants, because I think there was also a question I saw before on the number of participants and accounts we have in TIPS. For January, I have the latest data for January 2024. We had 232 direct participants in TIPS, 11 or 12, I think, ACHs, so AES technical accounts, but in total, these accounts result in 13,262 reachable parties. So a bit over 13,000 BICs can be reached via TIPS currently. Could be a bit more because this is since January. And then a last slide from me before we go on to your questions. On the traffic evolution itself, just looking a little bit, we saw before a nice diagram with how instant payments are picking up in Europe with the EPC graph that Fabrizio had showed. It started a few years ago, but I think also now the regulation is really introducing a very big peak in the use of instant payments. And you can see also the same is reflected in TIPS traffic as well. We're currently now settling an average of 3.6 million transactions per day. 1.2 of that is in euro, about 2.4 millions per day in Swedish krona. And this is still growing. I think month by month, more and more PSPs are becoming available and settle in instant payments. So this is only going upwards. So that was all from me. Thank you very much. And let's see for the questions. Maybe, I think, Aline, you will have to help me with this one.
Yes. Thank you, Jota. Very nice presentation. I think you actually managed to answer a lot of the questions. So that's good
I hope
news.
so. That means my presentation is relevant.
Super relevant, super relevant. I'm sure a lot of the questions could be pulled back, but I want to go back to one slide with you. So let me just find it here, because we have a few questions on participation. So let us go back to this slide, because there's a few people who are asking about reachable parties. Can they send and receive payments? Somebody is asking on this chart, like, who is here the reachable party and who is the instructing indirect participant. For instance, here is the PSP1 in your example B. Is that the indirect participant? So maybe you could just spend a little bit to highlight one more time.
Yes.
Who is who here?
Yes. I think this is always very useful because there's a lot of options. So I have to say this is always common question. So if you don't see that I have a TIPS DCA underneath, I'm also reflecting an example where this could be an example where this PSP doesn't have a direct account in TIPS, but it's reachable. So it's reachable via another participant's account, most likely. You always have the choice. So maybe we go back to the previous also slide, Aline, here. So the reachable party will not hold a DCA, but it will be reachable via another account. So another participant needs to be, let's say, their correspondent, that they will make use of this account. The reachable party can instruct payments. So if they wish, they can also directly instruct payments into TIPS. They can also decide to use an instructing party for instructing into TIPS. So there's a lot of options. So let's go back to the one slide forward. And in this case, in my example B, on the left, we have an example of a PSP who does not have its own account, but it could be reachable via another account. But it is instructing via an ACH in this example, just to show, and the ACH would, in this case, play the role of instructing party.
Super, Jota. Then there's another question on participation. So somebody is asking a question about the use of correspondent banking and whether or not they can, so they're basically using, they're accessing SEPA via corresponding banking. And can they use the correspondent bank to be the reachable party for them? Is that an option in your chart here?
So if they need to become reachable parties, they will need to use someone who's a direct participant. So the reachable party is always attached to an account. So you're reachable via somebody else's account. So you make use of your correspondent, which would need to have an account. So if it's another reachable party that makes use of another account, then okay, it's another additional layer of the chain. But there's a lot of options there as well.
Super. And then we have a few questions on who's what, but you remember you said that before, how many are reachable and who has bigs. That's also on the website, right? So we can, we can share the link with people so they can see who's.
The TIPS directory is published regularly on the website and can be easily accessible, actually.
Super. Then we're changing a little bit, Jota. Okay, so then we have some questions on the reserve requirements. Can you just say a little bit about what is it at the end of the day balance in TIPS? Is that the one that what's used for the reserve requirements? Can you share a bit with us?
Every day at 6 o'clock, so at the time the RTGS will close, the time T2 will close, it actually tells TIPS, okay, I'm closing the day, give me your balance. I want to know how much money my participant has in the TIPS DCA so that I count it towards the minimum reserves. That's the snapshot of the end of day balance. That's the same balance that will appear on the statement of accounts. Of course, for each account in TIPS, there is a generated statement of accounts every day, and that will have the end of day balance. That is the exact amount that will go towards minimum reserve calculation. And minimum reserves are calculated at the level of the CLM, and CLM is actually taking the information from all the other target services and adding them together to the same participant's minimum reserve requirement and then entering that amount.
Excellent. Thank you, Jota, for that. Then we have a few questions on, and I think maybe you can just clarify here. There's a few questions on the IBAN, so international bank account number, but TIPS accounts are not numbered with IBANs, correct?
No, it's a little bit of a different structure. There's a specific way that we define our account numbers, and it's very similar to the T2 way, so the RTGS account. So this is actually also public information. Maybe we can also share this information afterwards. We have a way that the account is structured. It has, of course, the BIC included there, but it's not the IBAN.
Super. Okay, so you guys are super excited. Okay, we're struggling a little bit in here. There's a lot of questions. We're trying to group them. But I think we have covered most of the questions now for you, Jota. But Jota is still here, so if we find any that hasn't been covered, then we can always come back to Jota. So no panic. So we'll keep going through the questions. Keep an eye on those and see, because some of them are coming in delayed. So, but we will be picking them up. Okay. So I want to thank you, Jota, for this part, and have you still on with us. And then we want to move on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to our next speaker. And now we're going to talk about the pricing scheme in TIPS. And for that, we have Geraldine with us. So over to you, Geraldine.
Hello, Eileen. Hello, everyone. Maybe, Eileen, can you please confirm that the sound is working properly?
It's perfect. It's
Great.
perfect.
Great. So as indicated, so the aim of this presentation is to present you with the pricing scheme of TIPS. So the idea is that we zoom together on this pricing for the payment service providers. In terms of maybe introductory remark, I will reuse what Fabrizio mentioned in his presentation, because I think it's very worth mentioning it here again. So the common thread of TIPS is that it operates on a full cost recovery and not for profit basis. And this is really the common thread that was used to set up the TIPS pricing, but is also used to perform the revision of the TIPS pricing. Talking about the revisions of the TIPS pricing, so there was in fact a revision last year, and since the 1st of January 2024, we have a new pricing scheme which applies. But here I want to reassure you, so the TIPS pricing is still a very attractive one, and it still aims at supporting the uptake of instant payments and at removing as much as possible any potential barriers for all PSPs, meaning that whatever the size of the PSP, the TIPS pricing scheme is there to support you as much as possible to embrace to the instant payment paradigm. So now we will go into the details of this TIPS pricing. So as mentioned, there was a revision of the TIPS pricing last year, but regarding the settlement fee for the instant payment orders, in fact, it was decided to keep the level that we had before. So the settlement fee remains the same, and it is at €002 per instant payment order. What was decided, however, is that it was to align this pricing scheme with the market practice. So now this fee is equally shared between the sending participant, so the originator, and the receiving participant, so the beneficiary. So concretely speaking, it means that for each instant payment order, there is a fee of €0.001 for the originator and for the beneficiary. So this is for the settlement fee. But next to it, so we have a fixed monthly fee, which applies for the PSPs. So if you decide to join TIPS as a direct participant, so this is what Panayota mentioned. So if you decide to own your own TIPS account, there will be a fee of €800 per month. Regarding the bank identifier codes, so the BICs that are authorized to settle the instant payment on this TIPS account, so there is a monthly fee of €20 per BIC that you will have. However, here you need to have two elements in mind, and I think it is important for you to have this in mind. So one BIC per TIPS DCA is always free of charge, which means that if you open a TIPS dedicated cash account, you will de facto have 1 BIC for free. Another rule is that if you have more than 50 BICs that are authorized to settle on this TIPS dedicated cash account, in fact, there is only 50 of them which will be charged. It was indeed decided to put a limit on the numbers of BICs charged because we understood that for some markets there is the need to have quite a lot of BICs, so it was decided to put a limit regarding the numbers of BICs that are charged. So if you have, for instance, 80 BICs defined on your TIPS account, only 50 of them will be charged at the end of the month. Last, but maybe far from least, I think it is important also to mention what is completely free of charge in TIPS. So we do not have any kind of entry fee or membership fee or onboarding fee. Again, the aim of the TIPS pricing is really to support the uptake of instant payments, whatever the size of the PSP. So we don't have such kind of fee. Next to that, there is also no information services fee, meaning that if you decide to join TIPS, you will get all the reports free of charge, and the same applies for the queries that you would perform within the systems. So all of this is for free. And last element for which you will not pay. So in case you want to perform some liquidity transfer between TIPS and other target services, this will not be charged. So for instance, if you want to do a liquidity transfer from your RTGS account in T2 to TIPS, this liquidity transfer will not be charged. And this is the same in case you want to do a transfer from TIPS to the RTGS. So this was the quick overview I wanted to share with you regarding the TIPS pricing. I think you understood that it's quite of interesting pricing for all the PSPs. And another element that I would like to share with you, I will go back to the previous slide. So in case you would like to review carefully on your own the elements I just shared with you, in fact, you can always refer to the Target Services Pricing Guide. So this guide is publicly available on the ECB website. We put the link on the presentation, and I understood that afterwards the presentation will also be published on the website. So in case you don't manage to find it, you can always refer to this slide, and I have the link here. And in this service pricing guide, you will see that there is a part dedicated to the pricing scheme. So you can even get further details on the TIPS pricing. Another element is that in case you would have any doubt regarding the TIPS pricing, you can always refer to your national central bank. I know that the colleagues are always there to support you in case you will have any question or any doubt to be resolved. So that was it on the TIPS pricing. I think you understood that it's quite of a simple one, and I remain at your disposal in case you would have any question.
Thank you, Geraldine. Super. So nice, clear, and short. Very good. Like Geraldine said, we will, and we're getting a few questions in, we will be sharing the slides afterwards. They will be on the webpage together with the full recording. So you can really watch everything again. And in addition, in the newsletter that we share with you and many of you receive, and we of course encourage whoever does not receive to sign up for the newsletter, we will also be sharing links because a lot of the information that we're presenting today, or all the information we're presenting today, is somewhere on the website. So we will be sharing with you like a little package of good to know information after the session as well, in addition to the recording and the presentations. So just for everyone to know that, also the one who are watching the live stream, and we have a lot of people watching the live stream today, so that's super. So thank you, Geraldine. So there's always a little bit of a delay in questions coming in, but since we are now, I want maybe to bring Jota shortly in again, just briefly, because we had a few questions that we're finding that maybe you want to pick up on Jota before we move on.
Yes, thank you very much. I went through a really long list as quickly as I could. Just a few points that I think are relevant for many of these questions. There was a question, can we join TIPS if we only have one T2 MCA in our central bank? So in general, I want to make clear that anyone who's already participating in our target services, it will be very, very easy for you to become a TIPS participant. The contract is practically the same with an additional kind of like part related to the instant payments. In general, anything you need, your central bank has the tools and they are your go-to people for asking questions. We are in constant exchange with them. Anything your central bank needs further from us, we are there and support them. We work together the whole time. And they also have a lot of experience with bringing in participants in TIPS already. The regulation is coming now, but there's already a lot of participants that, as you've seen in TIPS, we have a lot of experience with onboarding. Bobby will go into this topic as well, but I wanted to make sure that also all of these setups that we have discussed on reachable parties, instructing parties, direct participation, all of these options that you have, we could be talking about them for like 5 hours, which we don't have unfortunately today. So please reach out to your central bank, because there will always be the possibility for the best setup that works for you. So anything that is unclear, they can help you clarify it. I hope my slides also provide a good basis for you to think and start structuring in your mind what the setup would be for your organization. But there's a lot of options and a lot of practicalities that will come in your mind as you're proceeding one step ahead towards instant payment. So always ask your central bank. Feel free to reach us as well. We are here to support you in any of these questions. Then I saw another question on the statement of accounts that we discussed, if those are also sent during the weekend. So a statement of account comes at the end of the business day. That's the official statement of account. So we don't have a business day, like we said, on Saturday, Sunday. So they come at the end of Monday, 6 o'clock. But you could configure to receive regular reports on the balance of your account at specific points in the day, and that could come automatically to you, but it's not what we consider and we take as end of day balance towards minimum reserves. And then another question on the errors. If you send a payment from your institution and the beneficiary doesn't exist, what will happen since there's no answer coming from that beneficiary? You will actually receive specific rejection codes from TIPS explaining that beneficiary not found, for example, or there's a wrong configuration. This is also something that you will always have more clarity in. And then on the business continuity elements, you are asking if T2 and TIPS run on the same hardware. The answer is no. They run very separately. They process different, they have different processes and different hardware as well, but they do make use of common components. So for those of you that are already in T2 and got familiarized with the new CRDM, for example, that's the same that's used for TIPS. There's a lot of knowledge that you have done for entering T2 that will be used also for entering TIPS. That's the few questions I wanted to add. Thank you very much, Eileen, for allowing me a few more minutes.
Oh, thank you, Jota, for coming back. And now we can then move to the next presentation. We have Bobby
Eileen?
with us here.
Eileen?
Yes?
Fabrizio here.
Yeah, sorry,
Can
Fabrizio.
I just clarify 30 seconds on something on pricing in conjunction with the pan-European reachability? Bobby will forgive me for keeping him waiting just a minute, but there are two elements that I think are really essential here. One is that, as Geraldine said, there is no membership fee. So you can just come to TIPS and see whether TIPS is good for you. We are not going to ask you any single euro for that. And then if you really think that we are not capable, or that you prefer something else, you can always go without having to waste any investment. But there is also something a little bit maybe less nice that I have to share. So if you decide as a bank, if a PSP decides to participate in the instant payment through an ACH, you need to be aware of the fact that many instant payments cannot be settled within the ACH. So to be settled, thanks to the pan-European reachability, they have to come to the tip settlement engine anyway. So you will end up paying the settlement fee of tips anyway, because of the fact that you are in an arrangement where you cannot settle all of your instant payments. So before taking decision, of course, make your own mind and elaborate on all of your needs, because you might find that sometimes some costs can be hidden. What you know for tips is that the pricing is exactly what Geraldine presented to you. There is nothing hidden. And if you come to tips, there will be no additional fee, however your instant payments are settled.
Thank you, Fabrizio, for that. And then we will bring Bobby back. Bobby,
Excellent.
yes. So now we want to talk to you. So now you learned everything about tips. You know what it is. You know what settlement engine it is. You know the pricing scheme. You know how it operates. And now, Bobby, you can tell us how to join.
Exactly.
Correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can hear me okay, Eileen?
We hear you super. Thank you.
Perfect. Then let's have the next slide. So guys, yeah, I mean, you've listened to Dimitri, Fabrizio, Jutta, and Geraldine and Eileen now, and it's clear in terms of reachability, in terms of latency, scalability, in terms of price. So I want to speak to you about onboarding and the support that you will receive, the decisions you need to make, and the steps that you need to take. So if we look at the slides here, what's very, very important is the wealth of material that we have on the ECB site. And I'm going to go through all of the material that's there for you guys, for newcomers, for prospective customers. While you're deciding your form of participation, I'm going to go through that with you. So for the next slide, if you see, Jutta has already gone through with you about the ways to access tips as a participant. If you own a tips account, maybe you have two, you have a PSP, a dedicated cash account. There are ACHs who are part of tips. They have ancillary systems technical account. You could be a reachable party. You could access through another participant. This is completely fine. There are instructing parties who can instruct on your behalf. The ACHs offer this, but also there are companies who offer this instructing party facility without being an ACH. We have tips participants who are direct tips participants who use the facilities of an instructing party, who instruct on their behalf, but these tips participants are full participants in tips, and they are DCA holders and DCA owners. Yeah. So then you will decide your form of participation. It's up to you. Yeah. After that, we will support you. So if you look at the next slide, and we can see then, how do you access tips? There are two different channels. Of course, the A2A channel is key. You send your payments this way. This is application oriented and allows your system to interact. And of course, we are on the ISO 20022 standard, of course, and we have upgraded this weekend to the latest standard. So this is very, very clear. The latest EPC messages are now live in tips. The U2A channel is something where we have a GUI that we offer you, and it allows you through this GUI to print reports, to look at transactional details. Payments are not made through this. Tips actors can access tips in A2A or U2A via the NSPs. Now, there was a question in the chat related to the NSPs. We have two who won the concession for tips. These are, of course, Nexi and Swift, and we will discuss them in detail further down. So let's go through to the next one. Now, if you see here, we basically created a project plan for you. As you know, with the new legislation, there is a deadline of January 2025 for those of you to receive messages. So if you were to split your strategy, it's not really something I would advise, but if you were to do so and to decide only to receive by January and then later to send, then you can see here how we would ask you to take these steps. You can do it. We have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 month timeline. So you could see now if you started in April or May, you could still reach this January deadline. The preparation here is, of course, and what's key is your national central bank and your national service desk. So those of you who are T2 participants already, you have a relationship with your national service desk, you would contact them and you would say, we need the registration form for tips, we need the documentation. You would submit them, and then the whole adventure begins.
your connectivity, your setting up of the reference data, and then your testing. And finally, we would certify you, the Eurosystem would certify you as being able to go live in TIPS. So this is something you can have a look at this slide. It will be shared later. We don't need to go through it in depth, but I will discuss all of these steps as we progress. So let's look at the next one. Connectivity to TIPS is the very first thing. Let's have a look at that. So as we said, a new TIPS participant must bilaterally define a relationship with one or more selected NSPs for the purpose of getting connected to TIPS. The NSP offers functionalities: technical sender authentication, the entry into the closed group of users, the non-repudiation of origin, the encryption, the NSP protocol transformation, and all of these technical things that your NSP will offer you. This is for you to either speak to your existing NSP and see about connecting to TIPS, or perhaps to go and look and see what the offer is from one or the other to see which is the better one for you. Yeah. To establish a technical connection to TIPS and the selection of the NSP, this document, the Target Services Connectivity Guide, is available on our website, and this is really what you need to study. So please, after this session, download, go through it yourself, or give it to your connectivity experts for them to go through. The registration form is available from your National Central Bank. Those of you who have already registered to T2 or to T2S, you know how this works. The registration form is there, and your National Service Desk will provide it for you. And then what we do is if you're already existing in the system, we enhance your profile further with the TIPS attributes. Yeah. The registration at the NSP, here you need to look in our TIPS guide for onboarding of new customers, but then you also need to discuss with your NSP about maybe an increase in your participation to TIPS, or a new registration, whatever you plan to do. The NCB, so your National Service Desk, and the TIPS Service Desk will always assist you when you're trying to connect to TIPS. So you can call your NCB, you can also call for connectivity issues, you can call the TIPS Service Desk or mail them when you're trying to connect to TIPS. So then, if we look at our colleagues in the Nexi Colt, the former SIA, you can see they have a user registration, and this is once you have a contract with them, they register you in their SIANet XS portal. You join the domain, you subscribe to the closed group of users of TIPS. This is the same for SWIFT. And as part of this phase, the TIPS actor defines and provides its business user address, technical user address, very important for exchanging the A2A messages, the payments. There is a configuration that has to be done. There is the management of the certificates, and there is, of course, the local authentication. And this is the configuration of the security keys to secure the communication between the customer message interface and the network gateway at SIANet. Yeah. So this is how you do it if you are a Nexi customer or a prospective Nexi customer. Likewise, we can go to SWIFT. They want you to register in 2 steps. This one, you register the distinguished name in TIPS in the static data in CRDM. You will include this in the registration form. You need to be very careful with the distinguished names. They are very, very finicky. They are very, very precise. And to make sure that it's correctly in your registration form, and then we insert it correctly into our common reference data management, and then this allows the distinguished name to be registered. Then the participant registers with SWIFT to enable access to TIPS. The e-ordering is here on the SWIFT site. I'm sure many of you have done it before. It's listed under products and services. You need to join the Eurosystem Single Market Infrastructure Gateway. This is our gateway. The colleagues have explained it to you, the ESMIG. There are different forms to subscribe to TIPS Cert environment. What we call the TIPS Cert environment is our test environment. Yeah. And then there's another form for the production environment. For every submitted order, SWIFT will request approval from the NCB. So it's not just, you don't just apply to SWIFT. Your NCB must know and expect you, so that they will give the green light to SWIFT to allow you to enter the TIPS platform. And then SWIFT activates you as a participant on the network. So that is it from the Nexi side and from the SWIFT side. So then reference data. So this is vital. Before you start, you must set up your reference data. If you're already a T2 user, all of you are, or all of you, most of you are, the vast percentage of you are, then you have already in the Common Reference Data Management a lot of reference data. What we need to do is to enhance it with the relevant tips information. So the role must be included in the form. Are you going to be a direct participant? Are you, sorry, no, your role, but the roles required by the participant, these are the types of roles that we have privileges which allow the user to use certain functionalities. This must be defined in the form, but it's very clear in the form, and it's very clear in the registration guide how these roles work, what privileges they are, and what they give you, what these privileges give you in terms of your ability to use the system. Yeah, the participant will have further reference data set up in terms of message subscription and report configuration. There were questions about this. You know, some of the reports allow you to have a full, or completely up to you, and during the testing you will maybe change and see how it affects you. Likewise, you can look at the different types of reports, the different types of messages that can be received. So the example we give here is the tips directory. So the tips directory is a directory which contains all of the bit codes of all of our participants. And for this, it's available to TIPS participants from the moment you're registered in TIPS. Your BIC appears in the tip directory, and you are allowed to download the tips directory. It can be received in push or pull mode, in full or delta version. This is what you will do. You will subscribe and configure the report in the way that you want. So this is a very important part of the testing to see what you need. And I think there were some questions in the chat about the tips directory. We also publish it every month, so you can see who is reachable in tips as well. Very important here is the user handbook. This is on our ECB website. You can download this, and please pay close attention here. The reference data guide. This is also a guide that we created at the beginning of TIPS, where we saw that our participants needed some help in order to navigate the Common Reference Data Management, and our colleagues in the 4CB created this guide, which had started as perhaps a frequently asked questions and became a guide to allow you to configure reports, to allow you to set up. So please pay close attention to these manuals. All questions related to reference data setup should be addressed to your national service desk. So as we said, you know, the levels of support are very, very good. The national service desk has long opening hours. They answer your emails, and you already have your relationship with them due to the fact that you are a T2 participant. So for that reason, we should be addressing everything to them. So testing and certification. So what is very important here is the offer that we can give you in terms of testing. What will you be able to do in the test environment? So if we have a look, you can see we offer test instances of CRDM and TIPS. Participants can prepare for go live, and they can perform release testing after go live. So for you who are coming as new onboarding, what we can tell you is that the TIPS cert, the certification test environment, is really very, very production-like. So for many of you who work in the testing area, you know that a test box, things like that, they're not very production-like. What the Eurosystem offers you is a very, very production-like environment. And when we speak about things like the latency, you know, the scalability, this is all just as prevalent in the TIPS, in the test environment. The latency, the speed of the transactions, all of this is very production-like. And likewise, the scalability, we know that we expect a lot of customers to be coming now in the next few months due to the new legislation. The environment will be ready for this, and you will see that its performance will be of the required standard that you need in order to perform your testing and in order to certify. So you must connect to the testing environments. You must connect to the CRDMU test. For those of you who are T2 or T2S customers, you're already there. And to the TIPS certification test environment, this will be where you will discuss with your NSP. You will connect to the cert and you will start your testing. Please consult the TIPS user testing terms of reference document. This lays out the rules for testing. It also has a suggestion of a test approach for you. This is another one. Please take it as your homework and have a read of this document, or pass it to your test colleagues and allow them to read it so that they can see and plan how they're going to approach the testing once it begins, once you've proven connectivity and the testing begins. For the terms of reference, it covers topics such as the roles of all actors. It covers defect management, very important. If you raise an incident with us, you raise an incident with the National Service Desk, you will be given an incident number, and then you can follow it up using this incident number. This is very important. Testing with the other target services. This is a very important point. We are connected at the UTest level with all of the other services. So T2 is connected, CLM is connected to TIPS, T2 is connected to T2S. As the colleague spoke to you about, your liquidity becoming part of your minimum reserve requirements, you will be able to test this. You will be able to see the minimum reserve period in the test environment. You will be able to see how your balances in TIPS every day contribute to your final minimum reserve requirement amount. You will be able to view all of this in your test in preparation for production, so that you will know then, your liquidity managers will know how to use the liquidity on TIPS as a tool for reaching your reserve requirements. So this is something you can also test. We are connected on all levels here. Likewise, we have multi-currency in TIPS. We have the Swedish crown is in TIPS, as you know. The euro is in TIPS, as you know. And in our test environment, we are also preparing for the go live of our Danish colleagues of the Danish National Bank. So we have 3 currencies. Now, there is no element of cross-currency. These are separate, but nonetheless, they are all settlement currencies, including the Danish crown in the test environment. Yeah. So then, if we look at what we offer you, as I've mentioned, you're able to test in production-like conditions, and they are very production-like. What we also include is a counterparty simulator. And this simulator is 2 BICs which are created where you can simulate a counterparty. There's an accept BIC and a rejection BIC. So the accept BIC is one which accepts every payment you send. It will automatically accept this and send you a confirmation back. Likewise, we have a reject BIC which rejects everything, and then you would receive back a rejection. This allows you at the very first part of your testing to get your payment flow up and running. And then later, what we can do, for example, within TIPS, we don't have what we call cross-border because, of course, it's pan-European. But we would have, perhaps there might be a colleague in Greece or a customer in Greece there who is part of the DIAS clearinghouse. They would like to do a payment against someone in Germany. For this reason, this would be cross-border legally, let's say, but within TIPS, it is also an external, it's coming from a DIAS customer, but the DIAS, of course, their cross-border payments come through TIPS, and they would settle with the bank in Germany through TIPS. So internally, they would settle amongst themselves, but externally, they would settle through TIPS with the customer in Germany. And if you want to test this kind of thing, we can request testing partners for you so that you can test with another counterparty. This happens all the time. It's very, very common. The banks get together and they partner with each other and they test in TIPS. So this is something that we can definitely organize for you. I would say go first with the counterparty simulator, get your payment flow working, and then you can come and get ready to work with testing partners who we will help to provide. No problem at all. Yeah. So then we can move on, perhaps, from the offer that I mentioned, that how good our test environment is, if you like. We can move on to certification. So how do you certify? You must be certified by your national central bank in order to access TIPS, in order to access the production CRDM. You must perform the certification test cases. These are available on the website. You need to be certified to go live in production. These cases cover the main functionality of the system. Now, as you know, those of you who you're all payments experts, you know that the instant payment, it's a lean. It's not something compared to the massive functionalities that are in other systems, certainly in other target services. You know, in TIPS, we are lean. The test cases are designed to cover the main functionality of the system, payment, a rejection, a recall, whatever happens, and to ensure that the participant is able to correctly interact with the platform. The National Service Desk will assist in all queries related to these cases. So if you have any questions, contact them immediately and ask them. You only need to perform the test cases related to your form of participation. So for that reason, if you are a PSP, if you are an ACH, you have different set of test cases. If you are a receive only at the start, then you would perform those ones, and later when you become making payments, you would complete the suite of test cases. The National Service Desk may complement this suite with additional national authorization test cases. We have some NCBs who insist that you also carry out their test cases as well. So watch out for this. Ask your NCB if this is the case. All right, so now back to the documentation and back to the ECB website. This is really the important point. You go to the ECB website, you find the target services, and you look in the for professional use area. And in here, in tips, you can see we have the connectivity guide, we have the guide for the onboarding, we have the terms of reference, we have the user-defined functional specifications. This is the UDFS, very important tool. We have the reference data guide that I spoke about. We have the user handbook. And of course, we have the TIPS certification test cases. This is your homework. Please deliver this out to the members within your organization who will get the most value from these before you start to interact with the National Service Desk. Most of the information is contained in here, and then they will fill in the gaps for you in your National Service Desk.
Thank you, Bobby. Now you've given everyone so much homework that they're not going to ask you any questions. No, this is great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so what I might do, Ellen, I'll try and scan through here and see if I can take a couple of questions.
Exactly. But yeah, I might put you on hold a little bit while you scan.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
And then you scan, and then I bring back Jota, because I think we have a few questions for you, Jota, that we just could handle while Bobby scans the chat here, because there's a few questions maybe on liquidity management and a number of things for you, Jota. Come back.
I have a few here that I noted, so allow me maybe to mention the question and then I answer. So one question is whether we can use U2A to create transactions, meaning can we go in the interface we have and instruct their transactions. So for instant payments, the answer is no, because also we have this, as you know, the very fast limitation that the instant payment needs to fulfill. Manually entering a payment would not work. What you can manually enter is liquidity transfers. So that you can do via U2A. Then there's another question regarding managing liquidity and what can a bank do between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. So these are the time when T2 is doing end of day, start of day, like we said. If there are many tips payments exceeding the amount transferred from T2 to tips, what can we do, and under what conditions can liquidity be transferred from technical accounts to tips account during that time? So during the 6 and 7:30 p.m., we don't expect that you have to really be moving liquidity necessarily. What we do see in practice, because there's a lot of already participants in tips and we see this, what usually happens is that you have an understanding of the overall liquidity needs over the day and during different times of the day. So this happens already from before. Participants send enough liquidity onto their tips account, and we have never had really a problem, I have to say, with not having awareness on any participant's side on how much is needed. And we know for a fact that, as you know, because this is a 24/7, 365 settlement engine, you will not be emptying this account. So what usually participants do, they have a little bit of an overfunded account by a little bit, because also keeping the funds there still counts towards your minimum reserves, like we said, and you don't have negative financial implications by still keeping funds into this account. Another question, should banks have staff managing liquidity servicing overnight to be able to transfer liquidity from T2 to TIPS. Again, this is kind of handled in the same way. Participants tend to schedule their liquidity needs already in advance. Some of them might choose to have more liquidity transfers from the start of the window, which is after 7:30 p.m. towards TIPS. Another interesting thing here to mention is that also we are working on Eurosystem side to introduce some automation here. One of our change requests will allow you to set up limits. And I think I'm disconnected. Or can you hear me?
No, you're there, Jota.
You're all good,
Okay.
all good, Jota.
Good, because my screen just went black, so I can't actually see anything. But what we're going to introduce is that you will be able to set up limits on your account and say, if my liquidity goes below this level, please draw funds from my RTGS account into my TIPS account, or the other way around, when my liquidity is above this level, you may send my liquidity to another account. So this will be something that also will be introduced in future enhancements of TIPS. There was a question on the obligation to connect to both network service providers that Bobby has mentioned. If this is a requirement for you, and if whether you need to have at least U2A for one of the two. So I think the person that asked this question probably is aware of the requirement that exists for T2 critical participants. Let me clarify that this does not apply for TIPS. So there is no requirement for dual connection for TIPS. Of course, anyone who would like to set up a connection with both network service providers, that is absolutely fine, and it's your choice. Another question, how does it work if a PSP is already an existing reachable party but wants to become a direct TIPS participant? This would be quite easy. And again, you have to decide, do you want to become a direct TIPS participant and instruct yourselves, or is this already the setup you have? You just need to open an account with your central bank. So I would advise you to go to your central bank. If you're already instructing being a reachable party, then there's not much change. If you're not instructing directly, but you're using an instructing party, then you can become a TIPS direct participant on your account and still use an instructing party, like we said. Then another question, so the last one I kind of had seen, whether TIPS is mandatory or whether banks have the freedom to decide whether they want to offer this service or not. So the participation in TIPS was also explained earlier in the first session. You can have a look at the slides by Fabrizio. The participation in TIPS, either by having your own account, so being a direct participant, or becoming a reachable party, so just being reached in TIPS, is mandatory for PSPs that are reachable in T2 and have already adhered to the SCT in scheme. So it's required for these specific conditions. Those were the ones I had seen already, Elin. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Jota. I think we've managed most of them now. Scrolling quickly, Bobby, is there anything we need to highlight on the
Yeah, just a
onboarding?
couple, just a couple that I saw. First of all, there was a mention of a joining window. There is no window you can immediately discuss with your NCB. We don't have windows. We will allow you to join at any time, so there's no problem at all there. There are no specific times. Yeah. Another one was, should we when we register, would we register for production and certification at the same time? I mean, the best thing to do is to register first for the test environment and then later for production, but your NCB will guide you through that. There was a question about the counterparty simulator. Someone said they didn't know it was in use because there's a CR about the enhancement, but this is exactly the point. It's in use at the moment. We use it all the time, but we are going to enhance it to make it an even better service. So that's the reason that the CR is there, that you can see on the website, the change request to enhance the simulator. But nonetheless, it is working at the moment, and it accepts and rejects messages and gives you a good feedback and allows everyone to test. There was a question much earlier about Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland. Just to be clear, Romania and Poland we have customers from both of these countries, and they're settling euro in tips. We only settle in tips in euro and in Swedish kroner, and of course the Danish kroner is coming, and we're in talks with lots of other currencies, but for the moment this is where we stand. So this is when the Bulgarian colleagues come, they will also be settling in euro. So that is just for that question that I saw there in the chat.
Excellent, Bobby. Thank you so much. I think we're managing here to cover most of the questions. So again, thank you to everyone for their super active participation today. I think we'll count the questions. I think we beat all records today. But thanks so much for that, and thanks to the presenters. And then I want to bring back Dimitri. And Dimitri, are you still with us? And maybe
Yeah,
yes.
for sure, I'm there.
Welcome back. Very nice to have you. And for some closing remarks before, I just want to say a few things.
Well, I
Over
think
to you.
you mentioned it, Eileen. What a session! I mean, I saw the questions in the chat. That's really amazing. So this focus session is on instant payment is reaching an end now. First, I will start with a big thanks to the speakers, Fabrizio, Jutta, Geraldine, and Bobby. I think you did very, very well, not only with the speeches, but also with taking up the questions. You may have noted as well that we managed to achieve a perfect balance in terms of gender diversity, which is always good as well. A big thank to you as well, Eileen, and also to the backstage team for the real good organization. I have not counted, but we had a tremendous number of very concrete questions, and I can only thank everyone for this. We tried to answer those questions on the spot. If you feel that some of your questions have not been taken up, you don't hesitate to go and have a look at our website. There is more information available there. Do not hesitate as well to reach out to your contact points at your preferred national central banks. They are there to continue the dialogue. Just coming back a bit to the substance. At the beginning, I mentioned that instant payment is already a success with 15% of SEPA credit transfers being processed instantly. I also mentioned that 15% is obviously not sufficient to make this the new norm. In his intervention, Fabrizio shared with us the main elements in the coming IP regulation. And actually, we believe that with this regulation, all the necessary building blocks are there to support further the increase of instant payment in Europe, and also making it the new norm. In this context, Fabrizio also explained that we have already engaged in a dialogue with our participants to discuss how we could support compliance with the new IP regulation. One of the items mentioned was the organization of the new feature, which is the verification of payee. We are in a dialogue with the participants to discuss that. I hope we also managed to share with you the ever-growing relevance of tips in the IP landscape. Our volumes in euro are growing sharply. Beyond the Eurozone, tips is also seen as a very attractive solution by other currencies. At this stage, we settle between 3.5 and 4 million payments a day, 1/3 in euro and 2/3 in Swedish krona. I don't want to trigger a competition here, but I would really want to see the euro volumes increase even faster. As mentioned as well earlier, the plan is to increase those volumes further by something like 1.5 to 2 million a day when the Danish krona joins tips in Q2 next year. So it's tomorrow, actually. We also discussed, thanks to the intervention of Fabrizio, we discussed the difference between multi-currency and cross-currency. I think that's an important element. Multi-currency is what tips is today. We can settle multiple currencies, I would say, in their own corridor. But of course, when you have several currencies settling on the same platform, the ability to offer cross-currency instant payments become real, meaning with a currency conversion in the middle, this option becomes a reality. And we are working hard towards making this possible in the future. Then we had Jutta. Jutta brought us the operational dimension of TIPS. She covered the participation and the distinction between being a participant, being a reachable party, being an instructing party, and I hope that this was useful. I must confess that this is also complex, but what I want is that when you go back home, what you keep from this discussion is that there is flexibility, and that there is for sure a setup that would meet your expectation. That's, I think, important for you to understand. Then Jutta explained the why TIPS is super fast and super resilient. On this last point of resilience, she shared some more technical information, and one of the elements here that I like to mention is the notion of self-healing system, thanks to the organization in nodes. So the technology that we use for TIPS is actually very advanced. It's a very, very good technology. And that is also contributing beyond the three sides that we have. The design of the solution is also contributing to its resilience. And then, of course, we covered the point of liquidity management. I saw a number of questions on that. Liquidity management and the funding of the funding logic with T2. Of course, that's a point of relevance. Then we had Geraldine, who nicely covered the pricing for TIPS. Of course, I will not repeat what she said, but I hope she managed to convince you that the footprint of TIPS in the cost of instant payment is very, very minimal. And this is important because it supports directly the objective of cost efficiency that is enshrined in the new IP regulation. I think that's also an element of relevance. Thank you for making that so clear, Geraldine. Bobby, you told us how to join TIPS. We shared with you the various steps of the onboarding. That's connectivity, reference data setup, testing, certification. Of course, that's all very concrete stuff. We also shared with you the links to the documentation. And also, Bobby reminded you that you can also get all necessary support from the service desk of your preferred national central bank when you decide to enter into this journey of joining TIPS. To conclude, I will borrow some words of Jutta, which I found extremely good. And Jutta, you said, if someone wants to become a participant in TIPS, it's super easy. And I think this is correct. And I would take that as the closing word on my side. Again, thanks a lot for joining us today. We had on average more than 500 people joining, which is a very good score, very interactive. And I hope that you found the discussion insightful. And it's time now for me to wish you a good day. And maybe back to you, Ellen. I don't know if there is something else before we close this discussion.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. This was a super nice closing. I think it wrapped up really nicely today's discussion. So I don't want to say any more. I just want to encourage everyone to give us some feedback on the session. To scan the QR code, do it. It's really like 30 seconds. It's just multiple choice questions. You can do it super quick, and it will really help us tailor these sessions for you in the future. Because we do them for you. We do them for you to know that the target services and everything we do at the ECB. So it really is a great help. So take the time to do that. And then it's just thank you for me as well. It's been a super interesting and very active session today. Thanks to Dimitri for joining us and all the speakers. It was a great pleasure to have everyone here. And for all the participants, as Dimitri said, we had over 500 joining the WebEx, but also the almost 300 in the live stream. So thanks for coming into the live stream too. So that's it from us. Until the next focus session, we will let you know by if you follow us on our social media channels, you can stay up to date on that. So that's it for now. Thank you so much and goodbye.